I was born in Italy to the revolutionary adventurer Framtid Kvinner. While traveling to Venice, my mother died wrestling a bear to save the lives of my fellow camp members. Now, as a mere 3-year-old, I was placed in charge of the camp with my father Zadok. Due to my young age, all we could do was stay in the court of Count Huckbald until he felt charitable enough to fund our trip to the continent of Africa. After 4 years of groveling and minor favors, Count Huckbald decided to provide the boost to our coffers needed to reach the north section of the African continent. With a burning desire to complete the journey of my mother to the Borai homelands, I pushed us on to North Africa in the hopes we would find more work to get us provisions the rest of the way. We performed a few jobs in North Africa, but we determined that even at maximum capacity, we can't cross the Sahara comfortably in one go. Feeling the spirit of my mother pushing me on, I decided to travel to the Sahara in hopes of finding a supplier. Sadly, one did not materialize, and we were trapped in the Sahara with no employment or provisions. I got injured trying to get us provisions, and failed a few long-range mercenary contracts to also provide some provisions. Because by the time we got to those contracts, the wars were over. I decided we needed to push to the Borai homelands or die in the Sahara. After a very long, tenuous, and desperate journey, where I met Basile, whom I developed a crush on, we reached the Borai homelands and the kingdom of Canaan in my adolescence. Unbeknownst to me, this kingdom, with a king called my Fune, would be instrumental in my future as my greatest ally. We complete several contracts and develop a nice little army and a surplus in provisions that we hadn't experienced in quite a few years. Finally coming of age and seeing that the Saharan leaders, Amir al-Khattab of Fizan and Archpriest Segada of Gat, had weak armies, I decided it was time to become a landed individual, to spread the Borai ways to new lands, and to finally get stability in my life. I take the county of Murzuk from Amir al-Kabat and finally become a landed noble. After some initial instability from learning to become a noble, I marry Melisende, the friend I grew up with, to begin securing my legacy. While the decision to marry Basile was intense, While the desire to marry Basile was intense, I resisted to provide a reward for the loyalty of Thomas de Rittencourt. I also arranged for my brother Zadok to marry my Fune's oldest daughter, Danya, in a bid to get an alliance, intertwine our fates, and potentially inherit his kingdom in the future. After a few more wars, I became the Jarl of Gat, and rewarded my wife with her own slice of land in the Temple of Gat, and learned her language to improve our love. However, during these times, my brother Zadok caught me reading a kid's book in Melisende's language, and beat me up. I should have noted that odd behavior earlier, as it was an omen to what would happen. It turns out he was sleeping with my wife, while awaiting his betrothal to Danya. I had them both executed. Now alone with my two kids, Framtidisson and Zadok Suckerson, I decide to maintain the alliance with my Fune by replacing myself in the betrothal to Danya. The desire to marry Basile was still intense once again, but I decided to place her as the leader of the Gat Temple once I recovered it from Melisende's Catholic priest replacement. As soon as the marriage was official, I decided to get us the alliance with Canaan to push for my third duchy to form the Kingdom of Sahara. Now a king, I decide to push to get all my de jure lands under my control. Most of the remaining lands had Borai leaders, so instead of attacking my fellow Borais, I swayed Amir Akbar of Tibesti and Chiefess Alia of Bodel to join as vassals, marking my first peaceful expansion. However, the Jarldom of Air and the county of Bielma that separated the kingdom of Sahara and the kingdom of Canaan had a Sigyuk ruler named Sheikh Agdun. I quickly pounced on the county of Bielma when Mai Fune dropped his alliance with the Sheikh. This enraged Mai Fune's vassal, Chima Fume, who sprung a war to seize the county before I could even disband my troops. However, since he was merely a vassal of Mai Fune, he was quickly dispatched. With no bordering provinces and no more brazen vassal invasions, I waited out the truce with the Sheikh to then seize the Duchy of Air, to seize all de jure lands of the Kingdom of Sahara, minus the one that Canaan owns. Now, with my lands consolidated, I look to the north to form the empire of Maghreb for myself, and to the south I seek marriages for inheritance for my kids. My other 2 sons I marry to the daughters of the King of Houseland and the King of Borgu. While they are not the primary heirs, they secure alliances and claims for the future. However, the rapid expansion led to rebellious vassals and peasant factions. They were dealt with swiftly, and titles were given to more loyal people and certain family members. Then came a Bidic invader of the Borai homelands to the south that I needed to expel. It gave me the Duchy of Gobir, which was in the wrong direction of my initial invasion plans, but at least the Borai homelands are a little bit safer, and our borders touch the Kingdom of Houseland now. After dealing with the internal unrest and the Borai homeland's protections, I finally begin my conquest up north to try to form the Empire of Maghreb. I begin by attacking Amir Karaj of Mazab for the Duchy of Tuat. The plan is to grab that duchy and attack right into and claim the Kingdom of Anbia. However, near the end of the war, with my army stuck in North Africa, my daughter-in-law inherits the Kingdom of Houseland, which I thought was good news. However, a war of tyranny to overthrow her occurs as my armies are finishing their war in North Africa. The distance was too great, but confusingly, the person they decided to put on the throne was my grandson, Framtid, after my daughter-in-law lost the war of tyranny. You'd think that would be the end of my Houseland drama, but sadly it wasn't. As my armies were returning, I realized there is a second war involving Houseland. A great Orisian conqueror to the south, called Oba Adigini, was trying to conquer the Duchy of Kano in Houseland, which would make my grandson his vassal and remove him from the throne of Houseland. Not only that, another chunk of Borai lands would be lost to their religion. However, while defending from the conqueror, a subjugation war was lost to that same Bidic invader I pushed out of the Borai lands before. Not only that, it reset the war for my grandson's vassalization. So now I had to expel the Bidic invader and protect my grandson. But I had a plan. Originally, I couldn't call my allies Borgu and Canaan into the war because I wasn't leading the war, and that was considered gauche. With the war reset, I could stand my troops down and declare a new war to subjugate the Bidic invader of the Borai homelands. I was originally saving my one subjugation war, but saving my grandson and protecting the Borai lands is more righteous than helping myself form an empire. Right before the war, though, I wanted to try one more trick. I arranged a marriage with Oba Adigene's daughter and my 5th child. The hope was that if I won the subjugation war first, it could be used as a chip to stop the invasion of my grandson's land and vassalization. Speed was of the essence, so as soon as the marriage was confirmed, I declared the war, called my allies in, and we overwhelmed the Bidic invader. However, during the war, Oba Adigene captures my grandson, and the small Borai nation of Wandala decides to attack Houseland as well. While we got Houseland back into Borai hands, my grandson is captive to a great Orisian conqueror, and I have to defend myself against a small fellow Borai nation. The sheer numbers and general war fatigue means I had to go for white pieces as opposed to wins in those two wars, so we had to pay Oba Adigene to release my grandchild. To soothe my rage, I finally decided to break code and attack a fellow member of the Borai faith. Wandala tipped the war, so I was forced to white peace as opposed to win the war. So I took his lands and installed my daughter Gorun as the leader of the Duchy of Wandala. She was such a talented upstart that I had to give her a chance at leading. Just when I was about to go astray and attack more of my fellow Borai to form the Empire of Kanem Bornu, I realized something. Oba Adigene lost the Dissolution War to the south and lost the bulk of his titles. Adigene is still a threat overall, but the title he lost was the Kingdom of Ibo Buene, which covers a Borai holy site and the last section of the practicing Borai homelands under Orisian control. Winning this war would also put 3 Borai holy sites under my realm's control, giving me a chance to unite the Borai faith into a reformed religion. Feeling blessed by the spirits, I declare my only kingdom-level war and give it my all. After an absolute sprint of a war where I had to out-siege a surprise subjugation war against all of the Upspur's lands, we managed to win another amazing, intense war. I managed to put every child of age onto a duchy throne, and life was feeling good. However, as that war was ending, our alliance with Adigene backfired, as we were dragged into a war with the splintering Borgu kingdom. We were outnumbered and fatigued from the last sprint of the kingdom war. We lost the war and my health. I became infirm on the way home from that loss. Knowing time was running short, I set out on a pilgrimage to unite the Borai, to begin the reformation of the Borai faith. However, my succession would also be messy, as the scattered directions of my conquest meant forming an empire at this stage was impossible without risking it all. But I came up with a plan. I remembered my mother mentioning the old ways of voting for your tribe leaders. If I could implement that for our successions, we could have a succession that won't rip our realm apart on my death. While on the pilgrimage, the spirits gave me a warning that I will die in exactly 1 year. I knew I needed one more pilgrimage to be able to reform our faith, and I knew I needed to push every resource I had and all my effort into making Scandinavian election our succession style. Since I was choosing my heir, I went with the most qualified in my eyes. Framtidisson had spent too much time observing me conquer everything, and that seemed to be all he knew how to do. Gorun was still very strong of a warrior, both with her martial mind and her physical strength. But she also took the time to learn how to run a kingdom, not just take them. So I put all my resources and dying efforts into finishing the pilgrimage and getting Gorun elected to all 3 of my kingdom titles. It worked. Gorun is leading the realm, and the Borai faith is organized in a way to challenge all the other religions of the world. My life gave me very little time to rest. Hell, I'm giving my dying breath on the return home from that final pilgrimage. Let's hope my mother is proud, and my legacy will continue to thrive, with Gorun leading the way from here. I'm Framtidisson Kvinner, signing off for the last time. Let's go see my mother with the Borai spirits. Death takes me. Greetings, my child. My biggest regret is dying so early in your life. You grew up to be a great conqueror and pushed the Borai faith to new heights. You provided me many grandchildren to watch grow into fine warriors. However, you killed your brother and wife in a fit of rage, locking them up, disinheriting them, banishing, and a myriad of other ways you could have dealt with it. You also forgot a big part of my original quest, to bring equal rights to the Norse. You forgot entirely to modify our culture, and women are still not allowed to be warriors without special permission. However, you did work hard to ensure your most qualified daughter got on the throne, and I'm sure she can take the mantle from here. You worked so hard, my son, to ensure our family name flourishes in the future. So while I'm disappointed in some aspects of your journey, the end result is very impressive. You rest now, my son, the king of the Sahara, Houseland, and Idgo Bune. However, I'm not going to stop your brother from getting you back. Let's make up for the time we missed, my son.